everybody. Hi, everybody. Okay. Thank you, Derek, for that lovely introduction. As he said, I am Rebecca. I'm the substance checking coordinator for the Psychedelic Club of Denver, and I am here to talk about harm reduction today. So the introduction, purpose of today's talk, this is hopefully our first in a series of talks about harm reduction. So this is kicking it off with the intro. Today we're going to talk about what harm reduction is and a little bit of what it isn't. We're going to go into the principles of harm reduction as stated by the National Harm Reduction Coalition. We're going to talk about harm reduction in specific context of psychedelics because I think it's a little bit different and I think it's interesting to talk about in that space. Then we're going to get into the club and our mission, which Derek just highlighted a couple points of, and then the services we offer that kind of go along with supporting that mission. So, who am I? I am an avid psychonaut. I started taking psychedelics when I was 21 or 22. My first experience was with 2CB. My best friend finally convinced me to take it. At the time, I was a little bit of a natural exceptionalist, and I wouldn't take anything that was man-made, but he convinced me, and I'm glad he did. We had an amazing trip that night. Those of you in the club may have heard my watching Madagascar turning into lemur story, and that's kind of where that comes from. And after that, basically, he also gave me LSD, and that became my favorite substance of all time, and basically has been ever since. Fast forward a few years to the pandemic, my partner and I were tripping a lot because what else was there to do? And that's when I really started to see the overall benefits, psychological and transformative nature of psychedelics rather than just a fun time. And so with that, we moved to Colorado in 2021. Before we moved here, I had never heard of harm reduction, but we found the club and then kind of got introduced to it along that way. And within the first year, I watched a presentation about substance checking, which I had never heard of before, and I was like, holy shit. Like, this is citizen science, right? Like, and it got me really excited about, being able to interact with the community and being able to bring the service to people, checking their substances and giving them a little bit more confidence about what they're taking. And then that same year, we got the opportunity to volunteer for sanctuary services at Sonic Bloom. My partner and I both did that, and I fell in love with the idea of providing services for people in an altered state of consciousness. We both had profound experiences, his a little bit more troubling, mine a little bit more positive, but both of us came away feeling transformed by it and really passionate about harm reduction. And so with that, passion over expertise, I don't have any credentials. I've been the substance checking coordinator now for about 4 years, and I love it. I'm naturally passionate about psychedelics and what they can do, and I've sat through trip sitting courses and stuff like that. But other than that, I'm just an avid psychonaut and love psychedelics. And something else you should know about me is I'm a definite non-exceptionalist now, and that's even beyond psychedelics, just non-exceptionalism across the board. And that's because of my work in harm reduction. It's really shown me that there are different reasons why people take substances, and judging someone's path is not really our place. So I just want to put that out there because I'll be talking about a lot of different drugs today or substances, and I will interchange those words. So my space is from open-mindedness about all of that. So, what is harm reduction? I see harm reduction generally as the idea of reducing risk for something that could potentially cause harm. And this is, a lot broader than people think. I like to start with a global view because these are all things that people can relate to that you probably take for granted, but they're absolutely harm reduction, reducing risk from something that could potentially be harmful. So yeah, sunscreen, traffic laws, birth control. Anybody else think of anything else that comes to mind? Seatbelts, yes.
Wearing a helmet.
Wearing a helmet, yeah, awesome. Yeah, see, they're all things that we are doing to mitigate harm in everyday situations, to reduce our risk. And, we know that these things don't necessarily cause harm, but they could. And being able to mitigate that risk is important. So when we look at harm reduction in terms of drug use or substance use, the National Harm Reduction Coalition uses this definition: a set of practical strategies and ideas aimed at reducing negative consequences associated with drug use, and also a movement for social justice built on a belief in and respect for the rights of people who use drugs. And so they have outlined 8 principles. I won't read these all to you directly, but essentially accepting that drug use is a part of our world, and we should do our best to minimize harmful effects rather than ignoring them or condemning people for using them. Understanding that drug use is incredibly complex and multifaceted. People's relationships come from lots of different reasons. It can be, total abstinence or social drinking on one end, all the way to someone who, may have lost their house because they have a terrible addiction. And either way, there are ways of using drugs that are safer than others, and so that's another component of this. We want to establish quality of life for individual and communities, not necessarily cessation. That's not necessarily what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to make people have a better experience when they do use. Next, non-judgmental, non-coercive provision of services. So we're going to provide you these services, and we're not trying to convince you to do anything about it. We just want you to be safe. There's no bargain here. Like, just be safe with what you do. People who use drugs, ensuring that people who use drugs and have a history of drug use are involved in the policies and services that we create. They're the ones living it, so we need to get their input in order to be effective. People who use drugs are the primary agents of reducing harm. Sovereignty. Give people information and empowerment to take their own use into their own hands as much as possible. And especially, I like what it says, which meets their actual conditions of use. So like taking how they're using and why into consideration. Recognizing inequality. People's situations can affect their vulnerabilities and capacity, whether it affects how or why they use drugs or their ability to get help once they do. Those are factors to take into consideration. And lastly, despite all of this and being an advocate of drug use, there can be real danger and harm. So we want to take that into consideration and not turn a blind eye. So this looks like substance use, harm reduction. First and foremost, always education. When people know more about what they're doing, they are going to make better choices about it. And that's demonstrated in things like teenage pregnancy with sex ed. And my other example just flew off the top of my head. But educating people is going to give them the best defense and the best offense against anything that they're facing. Substance checking, which obviously I'm a fan of, giving people confidence in what they're taking, even if it's not 100%, improving that, making sure they don't have contaminants is a really important part of making sure that they stay as safe as possible. Syringe exchange and sterilization programs, both of these aimed at recognizing that people are going to use and giving them clean tools in order to do it, because the other risks that come along with drug use, especially intravenous and things like sharing pipes, you're spreading disease too. So that's an unfortunate side effect, and these programs are aimed at reducing those risks as well. So, harm reduction in psychedelics. All these principles apply, but like I said, I think harm in the context of psychedelics may look a little different, and so we're going to talk about that next. Number 1, psychological effects. I would argue this is probably the number 1 issue, although not necessarily reported as much, but psychological effects, meaning you have a rough experience and now, some people have psychosis, some people never recover. It can alter your thinking in a way that could be detrimental. And so being able to meet those kinds of effects with substance use is incredibly important, psychedelic use. Second is accidental, and this is the number 1 documented harm with psychedelic use as far as the studies I read, and actually mortality, Like, you're high as a kite and you walk into traffic, or you think you can fly. And a lot of us, we heard propaganda about that back in the day, but these were studies documented in Ireland and Australia and stuff, so this really is an issue. Next is social, and I kind of break social into two categories. There's the obvious one of like consent and being in an altered state, like you're just vulnerable regardless. So being aware of who you're with, you can be easily taken advantage of in social situations on psychedelics. But the other aspect is kind of an ostracization. Even though it's becoming more and more acceptable and mainstream to use psychedelics, there is still a lot of stigma, and it can be very isolating if you don't have supportive community around you. And last is polysubstance use, and I think this is something that probably isn't talked about enough, but it's really important to me. When we are taking psychedelics and we are already putting ourselves at risk of harm, they're non-specific amplifiers, so anything you add on top of that could potentially affect what you're doing. So the more substances you take, the more likely you are to have issues with it, regardless of whether it's because of your physiology or because of the interactions of the drugs themselves, or because it puts you in an even more altered state, whatever the case may be. But also, there's an issue of, which relates to the substance checking, of contaminants and not knowing exactly what you're taking. And so whether it's intentional or unintentional, the polysubstance issue is a big thing to recognize. So what do we do about it? Again, education, that's why I'm here. We're here to talk about harm reduction to bring more awareness to the psychedelic community. Substance checking, again, my favorite thing, and all the things with asterisks, by the way, are things that the club participates in. So substance checking, giving people more confidence with what they're taking, specifically to make sure that there's not an adulterant in that, or a red flag, as we would call it when we're checking substances. Dosing considerations. So this means you are weighing your stuff. You know how much you're actually taking. If you're mixing it, you know how much you're taking. And you make these considerations ahead of time to the best of your ability. I know lick 'em and stick 'em is really fun at a festival, but it is also very dangerous, because if you get a big crystal on that finger, you have no idea how much you just took, and that could send you over the edge. Another one, this is big to me, and I don't think a lot of people consider it as harm reduction, but set and setting. Set and setting being the term coined by Ram Dass and Leary, and the other guy whose name I can't ever remember. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I knew somebody here would know. Your mindset, knowing your state and how you are approaching taking a substance. And even if you know you're in a negative state and you're taking the substance because of that, like just being aware of that, setting an intention, and recognizing that you cannot necessarily control how this is going to turn out helps. And then, of course, setting goes back to that social aspect, as well as just your environment. I know there are lots of people, if you're like me, even if I'm at home, if I don't follow my routine and I'm in the middle of my trip, suddenly that sink of dirty dishes is going to be really, really, really annoying and could send me over the edge. So maintaining both of these things is an important way to help with your harm reduction. Community and the buddy system, I think this is taken for granted too. Like having community and having somebody either you're tripping with or knows that you're tripping if you're by yourself, like just to have that point of contact to say, hey, look, I'm going to be in an altered state. Can you check on me in like 4 hours? And then that way, if something does happen, which hopefully it won't, they can intervene. And then, of course, having community and being able to relate to others who are also having these experiences is also going to enrich your life. As I mentioned, sanctuary services and crisis services. Sanctuary services at festivals blew my mind. I think it is one of the most progressive and cool things we could possibly do. I think they should be at every single music festival, to be honest, or concert. Honestly, I think they should be everywhere. But having that space for people, whether they're on psychedelics or in an altered state or not, to just come chill when you're in an environment like that is just super helpful. It keeps people from unnecessarily being arrested. It keeps people from unnecessarily being poked and prodded at the medical tent. Just making sure that they have a safe space and somebody who can actually sit with them and listen to them and preferably knows what they're going through to settle them if they're having a bad time is really important. Crisis services, things like Fireside, where you can call. It's like a suicide hotline, except for people on psychedelics, where you can call if you're having a bad experience, and they will also talk you through it. And then lastly, another one that I think people don't consider to be harm reduction: integration. Like Derek was saying, you have that profound experience, and you can't, it's like ineffable, and you don't know what to say about it, and maybe it brought up some trauma for you, or maybe it showed you the fabric of life, and you need somebody to share it with. Again, it goes to the community aspect of being able to come and speak with people who have had similar experiences, or who are at least able to hold space for you as you process that information is super, super important. All right, so what harm reduction is not? Safety third. I put this in for Benjamin because he says safety third all the time. All right, testing your drugs by taking them. Guys, I can't tell you how many times I've posted in the Discord about the substance checking, and inevitably 2 or 3 members, I test my drugs by taking them. All right, cool. Don't do that. If you can help it, don't do that. I've done it. It's all right. Again, we're mitigating harm. I got it from my best friend. I trust them. They're so cool. They never give me bad drugs. No, they don't intentionally, ever. But you should still check it. I know the dealer or the chemist. If you do, good on you. But still, you should check it just to make sure, right? Mistakes happen. Errors happen, especially in chemistry. So it's important to do due diligence. All right, so that brings us to the club. And this is the first part of the mission that Derek was referring to earlier. The objectives of the Psychedelic Club of Denver are compassionate harm reduction, balanced and evidence-based education that promotes cognitive liberty, integration that leads to benefit maximization, and engagement that destigmatizes substance use. And so these are the ways that we do that. Education, again, yeah, that's why I'm here, education. In addition, we have little cards that we pass out when we table at events, the Dance Safe substance cards to give you detailed information about each substance. Pretty much all of them, it seems like. It's probably only like 12, but that's still a good number. Also, our mycology meetup, even though that's not necessarily geared towards harm reduction specifically, it is education, and again, like giving people as much information as possible about growing their mushrooms, and then just the benefit of community helps. The thing most near and dear to my heart, substance checking. So we do the substance checking, we use reagent testing. Again, we use Dance Safe's 9 reagent panel, which is their full panel. And we meet people on site, like wherever you are in the city, me and a volunteer or 2 volunteers will come meet and test on site and give you better certainty about what you got. We also have fentanyl and xylazine strips. We hand those out for free. Those are also given out at our events and whatever else. And even though it's not necessarily checking related, we also have Narcan. Right now what we have is expired, but we're working on getting more. And that just in general, like if you do nothing else for yourself, but if you go to shows a lot, having Narcan on you is a really good way to participate in harm reduction. And then again, the community and the buddy system, the Discord, the membership, like having this group of people that we can share things with has just been amazing. It keeps people in check. It helps people process things when they have a rough time. It's just so many benefits to the community. And then of course the integration circle that Derek mentioned too, like being able to process those ineffable experiences in community. All right, so now we're gonna get into the substance checking specifically, and I brought things for show and tell. So we have the 9 reagents rather. And they are all in here. This is what I bring to every check. Sleeve bags, I use gloves because, again, safety first, harm reduction for myself. And the reagents are these little, most of them are acid bases. They're little chemical liquids. And whoever comes out brings their little sample, and we put it in a little porcelain plate like this, tiny, tiny, tiny amount. And it has to be porcelain, don't use plastic. And then we use the reagents depending on the reagent chart, which I have to pass out if you would like to pass some of those around. So it's kind of small up here, but you can see it when it gets passed around. Up at the top are all the different reagents that we have, and down on the left are all the substances that we can check with these reagents. And then it literally shows you almost exactly what the splatter should look like when you use the reagent on the substance. And as you can see, there are several that, there are unknown reactions, or NR means no reaction. And there are several that have similar reactions, like this and this. So then there are other reagents to use to kind of like narrow down what the substance could be. And when we do this, we are essentially looking for red flags. We're not really looking for green flags. We're looking for something suspicious. But all of these reagents are basically reacting based on class or molecular structure of each of these substances. And so we can narrow it down pretty well with multiple patterns to try to determine what it is. And the language that we use is, and you can pass these out too. The language that we use is that, this is testing the way we would expect XYZ substance to test. We will never say it is 100%. We cannot test purity or potency. We are simply double checking to give you a little bit more confidence. And of course, like all drug use has risk. Nothing is 100% safe. So, we have to be very careful about the language we use when we do this. If something pops up, like a red flag pops up, then I will be like, like, I am not confident about this. I don't don't necessarily know what it means. Like if it's a blatant reaction, we have a little bit more confidence, but sometimes it just doesn't look the way it's supposed to look. And when that happens, we're like, I wouldn't risk it. I wouldn't risk it if I were you. And so then we send people on their way, and we hand out fentanyl strips. One thing I will say about the fent strips, most of the substances I check are for MDMA. And for a while there, it was kind of like, there's not a whole lot of data to show fentanyl contamination in MDMA, but more recently there is. Especially now that I was doing research on this, I saw like powdered LSD, and I was like, oh God, is that crystal? Like literally powdered crystal? I don't know. But the fact that more and more drugs are being created in different forms and getting more widespread, just the simple cross-contamination, not even intentional contamination with fentanyl is possible. And because it's so deadly in so small amounts, it's super important to just check whatever you can with fentanyl strips. So, and another thing that I found interesting about the dance safes rules, at least, is that they don't do fentanyl testing on site. They give the strips to their patrons and have them do it at home and point out the instructions, which I also have to pass around. So, and I think that's probably just a safer way to do it, to make sure there's no error if somebody has the instructions right in front of them, all the measurements, because it is very precise. This is science after all. It just kind of more secure that way, I guess. All right. So that is pretty much it. Any closing thoughts? I couldn't really find a good quote on harm reduction itself, but I found this quote from Rick Doblin that I felt fit. And the last sentence is what I'm going to focus on. Drug education should be honest and present a balanced picture of risks and benefits. And so again, like that's why we're here today. Presenting things openly and honestly from all sides is the best way to mitigate harm in this situation. We need people to understand that yes, psychedelics are amazing and they can do They have great benefits. They could change your life, but they also come with inherent risks, and we should do our best to mitigate those as much as possible and be honest about them so that we can confront them truthfully. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. I did want to open it up for questions, comments, or fun anecdotes if you have any experience with harm reduction or, yeah.
Two questions. One, what was the xylazine?
Oh, good question. So the xylazine is specifically for opioids, and they're testing for, like, xylazine is a contaminant that ends up in opioids. So it's if you are intentionally taking fentanyl or some other kind of opiate or opioid, it will test for a contaminant in those. Good question.
Yeah. And another question was, outside the club, what has your impressions been on people you talk to about harm reduction? Are they educated, not educated? What's compared to club people, kind of know the club people, but what's the rest of the world look like?
That's a really good question too, and as I said, I didn't even know anything about it until I moved out here, so my conversations even have been limited mostly to, when I do substance checks and I interact with someone, so I may or may not go into depth about that, but generally when I say stuff about, I'm really into harm reduction or I do substance checking, I get a mixed response. I work with a bunch of nurses and they're all like, that's amazing, but they don't know what it means. And so also when I talk to it with random people, they're like, oh, what is that? And when I explain, they are very like, oh, wow, I can't believe that exists. And I'm like, I know, me too. It's amazing. So yeah, I think it's mixed, but spread the word, man. Yeah. Anything else?
What are kind of like the most common contaminants that you do find?
Well, I can't necessarily pinpoint contaminants. All I can do is say, this isn't testing the way it's supposed to, and so there may be an issue there. What I have seen is people bring what they think is MDMA, and it's actually MDA, which is a really big issue, because I don't know if the MDA is more neurotoxic, has a different effect. It's much lower dosing is required. So that can be, if you think you have MDMA and you have MDA, it could be a bad time. I also had, this is my favorite story to tell actually, I had somebody who was renting an Airbnb from out of town, and he found a ground score outside of his Airbnb, which was in a neighborhood on a nice little cul-de-sac. And he was like, look, I don't really plan on taking it, but I just wanted to know what it was. And it was methamphetamine. And so he was like, I'm so glad I brought this to you. There were little kids in that neighborhood, and I'm glad I'm the one that found this instead of them. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You said there was a higher occurrence lately of fentanyl and MDMA. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Also curious on the testing of MDMA, come across it where people false test. I think that's one of the ones where it has to be pretty precise.
With the fentanyl?
Yeah, where it tests positive.
Yeah. So MDMA is known for giving false positives with fentanyl because the dilution is higher. It has to be a higher ratio to test. So I think with regular substances, it's like a 10-to-1. It's 10 milliliters of water per 1 milligram. Decimal math always throws me off. So whatever the ratio is. And then for MDMA, it's double that. So you have to use twice as much water. And a lot of people don't do that. They're used to testing other substances or whatever. And so I have gotten panicked text messages on the substance checking line. I've used 3 fentanyl strips and it's coming back positive for fentanyl. And I'm like, did you dilute it enough? And they're like, oh, no. So yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
If someone has taken a substance of any variety, or they haven't, and they're just having a really, really bad time psychologically, what would you do, or what would you direct that person to in terms of resources, or what can you do for that person?
So in the moment or after the fact?
Both.
Okay. In the moment, if I'm present, I would just try as many grounding exercises with them as possible. Validating what they're experiencing, because that's important. Like making sure that they understand that what they're experiencing is okay, is going to end, and is normal. That kind of thing. Using deep breathing to kind of help them calm if possible. If they're not able to sit still and deep breathe, then I would just kind of back off and like be a safe space for them as they are pacing around or whatever it is they need to do. If I'm not with them, and I would have them call Fireside Project or have them call somebody that they know. Preferably somebody who is sympathetic to psychedelic use. If they don't feel like they have somebody safe, I would tell them to call Fireside Project. Wendell.
You recommend reminding them if they've taken a substance?
Yes, reminding them that they've taken a substance is absolutely part of that grounding experience. Like, yeah, it's all right, because the loop, right? If you're in the loop, it's like, no, you took LSD 2 hours ago. Well, probably at this point more like 3 hours ago, and it's okay, it'll end soon. Just reassuring them that they will come back.
Also, you said something during your presentation about you don't want to test at the event. You don't want to show up with your substance at your event where you're about to take it and test it right there. And it came to mind, there's a whole series of reasons, not the least of which have been your substance tests negative. It's not what it's supposed to be, and you're at the event already. You might be a little late in the game to be discovering you don't have the right thing. Also, it might provoke people to take a pass on that. If it was a negative, if they tested way early, if they tested at the event and found out, well, it's something else, but it's something, they might be more prone to engage in risky behavior. Should we encourage people to arrive at the event with tested substances?
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly which point you're referencing. It may have been a misunderstanding, but I would absolutely, I don't care how soon or late it is, absolutely check it. And that's why I think, in addition to sanctuary services at every event, we should have substance testing at every event. That's a conflict of interest according to the venues. But in my opinion, like if people are there and they're going to be taking substances, giving them as many routes for safety as possible is absolutely the way to go. So yeah.
You might have bought it there as well.
You might have bought it there, right? So being able to test it there is important. Yeah, Wesley.
Can you elaborate on why that's a conflict of interest? Or why the venues think that's
Yeah, that,
Yeah, so actually, this is what Brendan told me. And Brendan, by the way, is our integration therapist, and he's also the one who did the Dance Safe presentation for substance checking that I learned from. So I had a conversation with him about that at one time, and he said that Dance Safe was having issues with it trying to approach vendors. They either wanted sanctuary services or substance checking. A lot of them didn't want both because they felt like it was just providing too much of an incentive for people to actually do substances. And we were like,
promoting it.
right, exactly. And it's like, but people are already doing it. So I don't think you're necessarily promoting it. Why wouldn't you? And it's insurance and like liability and all kinds of stuff. So there's business politics and legal politics involved with such decisions. So, Jacob?
I was just thinking of an anecdote. I work for the news, and we heard about someone who died outside of the club Beta in downtown Denver. If you've been around a little while, it was a big nightclub, but they died right on the sidewalk, right outside the entrance. And we went to talk to that person's sister, and she said, we think he took MDA and thought it was MDMA and mixed, there's a mixture of things. And so anyways, that club doesn't exist anymore, but it just made me think of that.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
That is so sad. And that's, it's exactly what you don't want to hear. Yeah.
Have you ever shown up to do a test and felt personally unsafe? And if you did, how did you handle that?
Me personally, no. I've done, I don't know, it feels like 100, maybe more of these. And we always do them in public. We do them at public parks. And I have never once felt sketched out or unsafe. If nothing, like the patrons are sketched out because they're like, oh my God, there's people. And like nobody has ever been like, what are you doing? Or, even remotely looked suspicious. So that's a good question. If I did, I would probably abort. But that's why we have 2 people. Like we always have 2 volunteers show up at these events just for our safety. So yeah, it's a good question. Anyone else? I would love more. Yeah.
Follow up on that. Can you explain a little bit more that part of the service? You talked about pulling to help people directly to test. What are the kind of services provided the club provides or you provide right now?
Oh yeah. So we do the substance checking. So we will, if you can text us and I'll respond and I'll find out what substance you think you have, where you are in the city, and availability. And then 2 volunteers will meet that person at a location that we designate in advance. And we come on site with the full kit. And I do it right there at the park. Definitely citizen science. I love it. And then, yeah, the education piece, and which, like I said, includes the mycology meetup that we have once a month. Like just being able to get people talking and learning from each other. Absolutely. And then integration. The integration circles. We have aspirations to be at clubs and places like that for sanctuary services, but so far we don't have the bandwidth to make that happen, but eventually one day, I'd love to.
Are we working with Zendo or DanceSafe?
Not officially. We do buy our reagents from DanceSafe and we use their materials. And at one point we had maybe I think they donated at one point, but Kes, correct me if I'm wrong. No. Oh, they did. Okay. But we don't have anything official affiliated with Zendo or anything like that. Although, if you are interested in trip sitting, I would recommend taking their program or looking into any trip sitting program as well. It's a really helpful thing to know. Yeah.
Segues into my question, is there any, like the buddy system, is there a volunteer sort of thing where people can actually sign up for certain times or certain festivals or whatnot?
I love where your head's at. That's a great idea. Not that I know of officially, but yeah.
A lot of Zendo projects did trainings where you could get trained to be a sitter.
Yeah, they train you to be a sitter, and then you can like volunteer to go on site with them at Sanctuary. But as far as like a call-in kind of service where like sign up for a trip sitter at your house, like kind of thing, no, not that I know of.
Yeah, I think that it'd be helpful, especially in lieu of, venues having a proactive aspect of, we can test on that instead, be like, hey, anybody going to this festival, whatever, be like, I'll be available this time and place. I don't know, have like more of a community aspect.
Yeah. No, I love it. Talk to me after. Anything else? Yeah.
Just on that note, I've been thinking about festival culture, and I feel like festival culture, we could take an intentional look at it and learn from it, because people have such great outcomes from psychedelics and festivals, and it's like a natural built-in. You have a couple sober friends kind of running the show, and you have, maybe a larger portion of people dosing, and I think there's stuff we can learn from that. Like, when I see people in the community go and trip together at festivals, or maybe there's one person who's not tripping, and the people who are, it's not official and you can't really sign up for it, but that's kind of what we're doing about that.
Well, that's my idea. Like, there are times when I've imagined that, like, oh, I want to do this, and I get there, I'm like, no, I'm in a perfect place, I want to do music, whatever. I would much rather be within the community of saying the buddy system sort of thing. But that might be, I just want to, we'll talk.
Yeah, no, I think
we might be able to develop, but again, it had to be volunteer and all that responsibility of it, and had to be understood by both parties, etc. But rather than necessarily a legalized thing we have to present to the venue, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's either anyway. I hate to say it.
But that's probably something you can put on Discord on the Let's Hang Out. If you're looking for anybody that's at Red Rocks at this concert,
Sure.
you can just look up
Well,
good group people out there.
and I'm thinking more also like, like your friends show up, but they're not on the Discord or whatever it is, but there is that community building without it being all worked out.
Yeah. Yay, one. List of one, okay. List of two, okay. Wendell and Jen, you're on. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes, Sage.
What was your favorite part of the research for this presentation?
Ooh, good question.
What part that really got you wasn't
So my favorite part was looking again through the National Harm Reduction Coalition's principles and recognizing how deep they go with what they're talking about in their philosophy and how important it is to uphold all of those. Like I read them and I was like, yes, these should be plastered all over. That's why I dedicated like 3 slides, you know. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's amazing that you guys are volunteering for this, and it helps a lot of people. Have you been able to find any way to find any funding or get contributions or anything like that to help cover your expenses?
Well, I'll let Wesley talk a little bit more, but I will say what I know is that we would like to get grant funding. We have started to better document the substance checking events that we do in order to try to get there, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Wesley, you have anything to add?
No explicit formalized demands, but I do think that's the path of an organization like this gets larger, since we do have that charity aspect where we provide services at no, we don't expect anything in return. I think it's probably natural that that'll happen as we get more organized. As Rebecca was saying, proving that we're doing good work. I think once we have proof that we're helping the community, then it'll be, I don't want to say easy, but the money.
Maybe it'd be a long shot to get money from the government, but it'd be harm reduction, like maybe impossible.
I can see state or government funding, and I can also see, I mean, the membership, you're a member partially to pay for events that you go to, but, you know, that $15 probably, 12 of it goes to events that you're going to, but then 4 of it gets diverted and goes off to the harm reduction and the rest of the community.
And I will say also, you know, funding is important, but also infrastructure. And getting consistent volunteers who are dedicated to showing up has been kind of an issue. And, you know, how do you incentivize volunteerism? I have a whole idea for a presentation on that. But so getting people to show up and be willing to go into that space is also a thing that I'm finding hard to navigate. But, you know, if both of those things could rise together, I think we would be in a much better position to make that happen.
To that end, during, when you're doing actual active testing, is there any sort of tip jar? A donation like, hey, we did a service, welcome to
So no, not formally. I have had people try to tip me. I refused because I do this for the pure joy of it. But I mean, I like where your head's at again. I think a tip for the club itself. Like, yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
So to the idea of funding, not
Hold on.
related to the video.
Yeah, go ahead,
We
Wendy.
have a mechanism to receive a donation. They could go to the website and make a donation there.
Is there one time yet, Wesley? There is? Okay, sweet.
There you go.
This one thing.
It's true.
Yeah.
I learned things today. Okay.
So many people that are like, dude, I got this, take it, and it's like,
You
yeah.
could also accept a tip and just say, this is gonna go toward the group.
That didn't occur to me at the time. I was like, I can't take your money. But yeah. Yeah. I've also had people try to slide me drugs. I'm like, I can't take that either.
Wait, let's test it.
Good questions, guys. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys, I did want to shout out Vivid Minds.